Okay, welcome everybody to the next episode of Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, a bi-weekly or fortnightly, if you prefer, podcast where we discuss all things Microsoft Cloud. For this episode, I thought we would try something a little bit different to what we've done in the previous episodes, and that is to, in effect, have a quick look back at last year, any key sort of highlights that caught our attention, and then have a sort of cast our crystal ball forward for the next 12 months. And think about what we're looking forward to in terms of perhaps new features or new capabilities, or perhaps some concerns we have going forward, or even, just a wider, this is what we think might be happening with Gen AI or other topics. So hopefully that will be a little bit more interesting. There might well be some chapter information coming up, depending on how this falls out, because as you can probably tell, this is not scripted, and we've put a lot of planning and effort into coming up with this section today. So if there is chapters, go and have a look at it below, and you can skip forward to see what we're doing. If there isn't, then you won't be able to. Anyway, without any further ado and any more waffling from me, I thought we would kick off with just having a quick look back at something from each of us that sort of caught our attention last year, or that we thought was a really good thing, or something that was very interesting for us. And it's not necessarily going into any depth around this. It's more just a headline piece that sort of caught our attention, or other areas like that. And for me, and we sort of have covered this in one of the earlier pods as well, is the focus on security. It's so nice to see that has changed, at least more publicly. I think internally, security has always been, a key component. And I suppose if I look back and say this is actually the first full calendar year that I've been in the current role that I am, which obviously means I have to have a security focus. So perhaps it's just influenced by that change of role. But looking back to Ignite, the sort of focus on security from either Purview or from DataSec or from the sort of Sentinel XDR pieces, through to the items that we're seeing across the broader ecosystem. We all work for IBM, as you all know. It's not a sponsored podcast by IBM, so all our opinions are our own, etc., usual disclaimer nonsense. But obviously, if those in the know that Palo Alto acquired QRadar from IBM, and I think that sort of integration process is currently ongoing. So you can see that it's not just from a Microsoft perspective that this is becoming a focus. So whether that's from a platformization play, which is what sort of Palo and Microsoft are looking at, so where you're basically getting as many security tools as possible from one provider, with the theory that will give you a little bit more control over things like release cycles, compatibility between different segments of the security stack, potentially cost savings, etc. That is nice for me to see over the last year that is becoming a lot more of a focus across the sort of the board. That then coupled with some of the issues that we did see arise, and I'm talking about the CrowdStrike piece here, some of the announcements around Microsoft. I know we are sort of a pro-Microsoft body, for want of a better description, but obviously some of the things came up around the Exchange, issues they had with the M365 service, around some of the sort of US government pieces, which again brought up or highlighted, to me anyway, the importance that this is going through, certainly from last year towards this year. I don't know whether David or Cyrus, you have any sort of opinions or views on that particular component as well. But otherwise, I will just transfer it across to whoever wants to go next with their view of last year.
I was going to say, Richard, I mean, having been in IBM for 2 years now, I think when I left Microsoft, there was always that sense of security first, security first, security first. I think some of the changes that you see is this whole secure by default, secure by design conversation. So whilst there was security in the stricter sense, I think being more intentional around having the right configuration at the outset, I think, is one of the major shifts I've seen. So I'm sure we've all seen, the instances of where cloud services and specific aspects of cloud services, when you provision it, it doesn't necessarily have or didn't historically have the right security on it. So you set up a blob and it was access to everyone on the internet everywhere. Is that really what you wanted? Or back in the early days when you were setting up VMs, and the RDP port will be open to everyone, within seconds of that VM being spun up, you would be hit from all over the world, which is really indicative of how much these capabilities are being probed, right? Because for it to be attacked that quickly, and I did it intentionally once to see what had happened, and I turned it off. I got really quite scared quite quickly. So I think that conversation, I think that's the pivot in the conversation more than just more security. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did exactly the same test that you did a few years ago. I just stood up a machine. I think it was actually on my home network, and turned the firewalls off. Switched all the sort of controls off, and it was within seconds, I think, that you were starting to see malicious activity, for want of a better word. I mean, it was remarkable how quickly you started to see things like port scans going on, or sort of queries against the IP address of the DNS environment that you might have been on. So it is scary. So the Secure Futures initiative from Microsoft, so the secure by design, secure by default is more of an IBM terminology, is, I think, a good response to some of those. And I think we saw it with Azure Local. There was some mention that within the Ignite topics, and I'm going to have to go back and dig up the exact number, but there was or the exact phraseology, but it was something like, we have, configured all the security defaults to what they should be to give you a secure environment. I can't remember. I think they gave a number of what that
100%.
Which is such a nice change to, as you said, to go in and get in a blob store, and then having that blob store completely open to everybody who could come along. Not pointing any fingers at any particular providers for that one. And I think it does make a big difference. So again, I don't have the stats to hand, but there is like a big sort of percentage of cyber incidents are caused by misconfiguration of cloud services. Now, whether that's just leaving ports open or just sharing it with everybody, or something slightly more complicated, it is a big factor that we have to consider going forwards.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other aspect is our friends in public sector and health and defence moving towards that sort of security up front. So, the secure by default thing now puts the onus on the people deploying the systems to ensure they're secure, which everyone should be doing anyway, right? I mean, the fact that you wouldn't be doing that is somewhat alien to me, but what was happening was you'd have these big programs and projects running for years and years and years, and somebody go, you now have to do security assurance. You have your pen testing and your security, and then you have massive delays as people then have to reintroduce elements of the security stuff back into whatever the solution is. And I think, again, sort of the pivot of those organizations moving that way, I think is something that has far more impact as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's very interesting to me that I was on a presentation by Microsoft yesterday. So just a standard piece. And you would think that, cloud is not new to IBM, it's not new to Microsoft, it's not new to a lot of the people listening to or watching this. And yet one of the slides was on the shared responsibility model. And you would think that by now people would understand or would not need to have that message reinforced around that particular model. And okay, they presented it in a different way to the usual sort of, I'm not sure how to describe the usual model, but I think everybody knows what I'm referring to. They did it in a slightly different way, but it was still the same thing. If you're IaaS, here's where the responsibilities lie. If you're PaaS, here they are, et cetera, et cetera. And I was watching that going, really, do we need to have that message reinforced? And I suppose we do. If it's in an official Microsoft deck, then they obviously feel that message needs to be restated when they're presenting solutions. So who knows?
Yeah.
But anybody who's looked at the Microsoft security reference architecture will know that this is a complicated and many interlocking parts piece. Cyrus, any thoughts from yourself?
No, it's really interesting. And you both are all the people from Microsoft. You used to work for Microsoft directly. For me, it was a black box. And this year, I had the opportunity to work with a Microsoft employee directly, feedback some issue we had with the products, making some help for the improvement. And I started to appreciate the Microsoft culture. And I could not see a shift because I didn't know what was the baseline before. You have more insight than me. From what I hear from you, it matches also from what I see. I used to be a bit not too sure about the reliance fully on AI. AI will solve everything. As you know, the model is not good. The business model is not good. It's too expensive, and you can't just throw everything to the AI like a magic Pandora box. It will not fix everything by itself. It's more human problem. What you mentioned with the presentation, talking about this kind of presentation that are known for like more than 10 years, the shared responsibility model. We have a different format today, and next podcast we can talk about that. I was looking into the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and I saw that Microsoft, for the Ignite, I was digging more. I saw that they were really more involved into this Linux Foundation, which is also funded by Google. And I was really interested by what they're trying to do to remove still today the friction for the customers to go to the cloud. And from what I saw last year it's a mix of bad feedback. Some customers could not really achieve the saving cost goal with the cloud because they don't have the cloud native mindset. They just lift and shift, and it's more expensive because they were not really trained enough. They were not followed by the partners that says now you can change the way you design your application, microservice, etc. It's not just Kubernetes, AKS or whatever. It's a different mindset. You can use serverless, etc.
It is. I don't know whether you're referring to the same article that I read, or at least on the same topic. But so I don't know whether I can mention a name. But anyway, a big US insurance company has decided that they want to repatriate their workloads from the cloud back to on-prem, and some of this workloads was on Azure. And the article was interesting. I'll put a link to it in the notes, or at least the version of it that I read anyway. And it was interesting to see the reasons why they were doing this. And primarily it was a cost reason, that it was just costing them more than they expected to in the cloud. There were some other considerations in there, regulatory change, issues running legacy or monolithic applications within a cloud environment, et cetera, et cetera. But to my mind, this comes down to when you look at those Gartner 5 Rs or 6 Rs or whatever number of Rs there is in that Gartner one, a lot of people ignore the retain piece. Yeah. And they look at it and go, oh, we're going to close the data center, so we must move everything from that data center into the public cloud. And they fail to consider, and sometimes consultancy organizations don't help this, because again, they are going to be saying, yeah, we can do this, we can modernize that, or we can do a lift and shift and do your operations pieces. There's blame on both sides of the course for that one. But you look at some of these sort of legacy applications. Now, let's not even talk about mainframes or sort of mid-range components here, where there are solutions for you to do that in a variety, either through a sort of a transformation project, emulation, or actually running physical tin within the cloud data centers. But you just look at some of the older sort of, Windows-based platforms that are sat there with multiple sort of servers, N-tier architecture, et cetera, and you take that and you lift it as is into the cloud, and you do things, and I've seen this happen, that you have MVAs for firewalls. So instead of using cloud-native firewalls, you use an MVA. And again, all around that, load balancers, all that sort of peripheral sort of supporting infrastructure that you need on-prem. They've just replicated that in the cloud. And then you look at it in 3 years' time and go, you're surprised that that's the expensive way of doing it. And a lot of people don't think about sort of the landed costs either. So, you might have servers that are here on, you've still got 2 years left of your refresh cycle. So you have to think about that cost as well. So what you're going to do with that cost that you sort of stranded within the DC. And I've seen so many instances where people have just completely ignored that and just said, look, it's already sunk. We've spent it already. Don't have to worry about it. It's dead. We can just move and start from scratch. But it's not, unfortunately, it's not quite that simple. And I definitely think that's a subject where we should probably dig a little bit deeper and actually have a look and say, well, actually, what does this really mean? Now, I've always referred to it as cloud-aligned architecture. So if you're doing a lift and shift, you have to look at whether or not that is going to be using the right level of cloud components going forward. So again, do you need to have an NVA? Okay, you might say, well, on a firewall, I need to have this, and this feature that the Azure native firewalls don't have. Okay, fair enough. Is that really a business requirement that you have to meet? If so, then great, go and do that. But then you come into that question saying, okay, there's going to be some additional costs involved. Is that worth the cost? So you have that whole business decision that you have to go through to say, actually, is that the right piece? But then unless there is a real requirement for it, do you really need to do that for all the environments? So does your dev test environment have to have the same MVAs with the same configuration settings? Who knows? But I certainly was working for a UK insurance company several years ago where they basically replicated the infrastructure as is from on-prem to the cloud for all of their environments, all of them. And I was just looking and going, what can you say? Anyway, probably get myself into trouble if I continue down that route, so I will stop.
You will.
We will go on to a different option. So I don't know, Cyrus, David, who would like to go next? I think last time I went to you, Cyrus, first. So perhaps David, let's pass it across to you. And what was your thoughts from 2024? And I can't believe I'm saying 2024.
I mean, there's just so many things across so many facets of Microsoft, isn't there? Because we span so much. I think the really interesting thing that I've been watching is the quantum stuff, and this is probably a bit off beat first, really, but it feels like last year was sort of again a pivotal moment in the quantum space, with what are they called, Quantanium, managed to have improved error rates. So I think it's something like 800 times lower with the of logical ones. No, let me start again. So logical qubits with error rates of 800 times lower than physical qubits. That's what I'm trying to say. Which is huge, right? And if you think about the physical qubits, obviously the temperatures and everything else that requires that to run sub-zero temperatures, there's being able to run it in a logical sense, I'm sure, is a huge step forwards, as is fault tolerance and so on and so forth. So I think that's that was awesome. The increasing number of qubits. So, these things I think are now up to Microsoft Managed 12. I can't remember what Google has done with Willow, and IBM, obviously, we do a lot as well. So it feels like that industry is sort of poised almost to step forwards. And as I understand it, they're already being used on some really, really tough problems. And I think we, on one of our previous podcasts, I mentioned, I can't remember, but something that would have taken 10 trillion years was solved within a matter of hours recently on a quantum computer. And it feeds nicely into your security stuff, right? Because this whole post-quantum security arena, I think certainly we're, as IBM, we're doing a lot of thinking, as is the broader industry. But I think that's a really interesting thing to consider, and knowing that potentially in the future, if you've got some encrypted data with traditional PKI keys, they will be susceptible to be broken if you've harvested the data already down the road is a really interesting and fascinating thing. As is this is the geek in me, you know, the opportunities for space. I think quantum opens up a lot in the space context. So I think my ideal vision is, you know, you've got a digital twin using quantum, so entanglement happening. So your mirror image of, you know, whatever's happening in the spacecraft, and you've got it on planet, as it were. I think that is awesome. Obviously, some way to go before that, but they've already proven that they can push quantum entanglement over fiber that's already transmitting data. So they're actually doing it with light.
Yes.
I don't quite understand how that works. The science is way beyond me. Over, you know, that was sending internet traffic, that was sending data, and they managed to get the over across, I think it was about 38 kilometers or something, which is hugely impressive. So I see that continuing, and I think looking forwards, you know, what is the intersection of quantum and AI? I think for me is the thing. Is that the thing that breaks the current constraints around power and heat and cooling? You know, could you have one quantum computer doing the job of what, you know, thousands of GPUs are doing today? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that's my stroked my inner geek last year.
Actually, well, strange you mentioned quantum. So the post-quantum cryptography piece at IBM and Microsoft is actually called the same thing. So it's called quantum safe. So I'm not sure if that might change in the future. So it's certainly a big focus for IBM is that piece. And I was going to say ironically, it's not ironic. So I might have to go and shoot Alanis Morissette around the putting that in my head. Again, not serious. Don't do that. I actually joined the Open Quantum Safe community a couple of days ago, and it's open so anybody can join, and they have bi-weekly or fortnightly if we're in the UK calls. So it was scheduled for me to join that yesterday to actually go and find out what they're talking about, what their sort of plans are. So IBM is a member, you know, a couple of the other sort of large tech companies. I don't think Microsoft is. I'll have to double check on the community piece there. But it's open to join. So I'll put the link to that community for anybody who's interested in the show notes. And yeah, you can go and have a look and join their sort of update calls. Potentially, I'm assuming get involved in some level or other with that. Anyway, excellent. Cyrus, over to you.
No, I'm happy you talk about quantum, David. That's my big frustration. I haven't learned more about quantum. I'm reading sometimes some articles, some different news. I saw these two planes linked with quantum. They were doing a test, guiding them together without any connection. When I read something like the speed of quantum is faster than light, it blew my mind, because normally it's a universal constant, the light. You can't go faster. So when I read that, I'm like, okay, that's not for me. I need time, I need focus, because it's going in all the direction. But it's very, very interesting.
Hard maths, Cyrus. I'm not. I fully admit I'm not up to the maths.
No, it's not just because of math. It's even IBM. We are lucky. They've made a book, and selfishly, it's a book for the clients. So it's like 100-page explaining all the research they made. IBM is a huge company for research. If you're interested online, just go YouTube IBM research, and they just do research, sometimes public, sometimes not public. There was these most famous videos when they could block atoms and make a movie with atoms. And if you look for how they make that, it's the same philosophy they use for studying quantum. So and I asked the book, I never received it, obviously, because you need to have a client for that. You need to prove that you can generate some revenue, which I don't. No, my highlight for this year was actually learning more about IBM, learning more about all these research. The good thing is we are in plenty of greenfield projects for AI. So there's so many projects that sometimes don't run, sometimes run for different industry. And it actually gave me some ideas for myself, for the things I want to research. The hope I have for the next year, if I can project that, is these projects, they're more civil one. Because if you see the geopolitical situation, There's a lot of military projects for AIs and corporation projects. What I hope is there is also more universal use of AI, not just like talking to ChatGPT and can you solve my math problem, but how can I solve this particular issue? David, you talked about the squirrels and different things, more about that, agriculture. And there's so many projects that were dormant or a bit stagnant, if I can say it. Years ago, we called low IT or it's called permacomputing. If you can Google that, it's very interesting. Permacomputing, what happens if there's a global crisis, there's no more Taiwan to produce components. What you do, you can reuse old like Raspberry Pi, Nintendo NES. You can use the motherboard of that to open gates, close gates, manage IoT stuff. It's very interesting what we can do. And today with AI, and you don't need like massive supercalculators. NVIDIA started to release like cheap components. And I know IBM have a lot of like secret things they have. And they could release those things to compete and say, you know what, £300 and you have your micro supercalculators. Here you go, do plenty of projects. That is what I'm sure and I hope I'm going to see more. And through those plenty of micro projects that are in standby, then the bigger project will take more sense. There will be more investment. There will be more enthusiasm instead of just like a hype. That's my subjective feelings. For cybersecurity, less. I was just doing my work for IBM, so I was learning, doing. And one thing I'm really happy about is this CCP program from Microsoft. This I talk almost every day to Microsoft employees from all over the world, Israel, US, Ireland, everywhere. It's very interesting. All the projects, and they listen. So anyone who have the passion for the project can just join and just say bluntly, like, I don't like this feature. It doesn't work, doesn't help. We lost a deal because of this. And they listen, not just for the deal, even for your subjective 2 cents. So, yeah, I can't talk too much, Richard, so I'm going to stop here.
You can talk too much.
But there's this again, I go to the details. So, you know, when you see the CNCF, there's so many projects. And I know the guy name. You probably know the guy. I forgot. I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce correctly. Is Mark Rusinovich.
Yeah.
Is the Azure CTO.
Yeah. I was going to say we all know Mark, but we don't know. Well, I don't.
I didn't know him.
I'm aware of him.
Okay. No, I didn't know him. You know, there's plenty of names, important people from Microsoft. So I was watching some news about him, some speech on Azure Ignite 1 year ago and this year, and it seems that there's not that many views from what he presents, but actually I think that was the most interesting ones when he talked about the Hyperlight. We'll talk about that next week, in 2 weeks, sorry. But it's very interesting what they try to do in the details to go into the function level to allow secure communication in the cloud native.
Mark is. I've sat through. Sounds like it was an ordeal. It wasn't. But I remember one he did a couple of years ago where he sort of broke down how the Azure data centers are architected in terms of like the server racks and the networking, etc., which I found fascinating, really interesting. And I certainly shouldn't be probably promoting other people's podcasts on here, but him and Scott Hanselman have got their own
new one, haven't they?
Yeah, where they learn something new every week or something. So the last one I saw was they learn about skincare. So not IT related at all, but he is very good.
I'd shout out the Hansel Minutes as well, because that's well worth listening as well. His podcast is awesome. And, you know, when we were at Microsoft, I'm sure you had it, you know, Mark's sessions on internal readiness events were oversubscribed. You'd have people, you know, big auditoriums, absolutely rammed full, because he I think he's an engineer's engineer. If you know what I mean, tell. Because you know he built sysinternals, right? He was the guy that wrote all that, and obviously then got pulled into Microsoft. So he's still hugely technical, and that comes through in spades. You know, his joy in finding ways of being able to crack LLMs. It's tangible.
Yes, there was a session at Ignite, which I think we talked about a couple of weeks ago, which sort of went through how they sort of broke a couple of the foundational models by doing relatively simple things. So again, well worth a watch for anybody who hasn't seen that.
No, nice. I didn't know it was the same person who did Synth Internal, so definitely I know him. But it's just I saw he was a speaker. I didn't recognize the name. I was like, this is so insightful. This is really interesting. They just made the project open source in the CNCF. And you know, like there's like Kubernetes in the CNCF. So you don't know this project can become nothing, or suddenly they can become the new Kubernetes. They can become the future. So there's a huge potential in that one. But I'm teasing for the next episode, so it's fine.
I think something we've all touched on, right, is open source. I think that, you know, the last year and couple of years, maybe a bit more, you know, there's been a big push to open source things from Microsoft, right? Whether it's Dapper or whether it's, you know, the what you mentioned there, SRS. They're one of the largest contributors to Linux, right? They're now a significant contributor to, I can't even get that word out today, to Chromium, because obviously it's being used in Edge. You know, there's an awful lot that's being given back, which is light years away from what it used to be like, you know, when I joined. You know, it certainly wasn't the same place.
And even Radius, you talked last time about Radius. It's from the CNCF, it's the same, they contribute a lot. It's just crazy what they do. I mean, they use the community in the correct way now, so it's absolutely excellent.
I think that is something that I think next year. I mean, you started talking about the next year with the sort of Gen AI pieces, and I think that's definitely worth the conversation because, you know, last year I think was the year of sort of Gen AI hit the. Now I can't say Gen AI. I don't know what it is, but I cannot say it properly, so I have to really think and enunciate that word. But that was the sort of year where that broke through into the mainstream. Obviously, we've been doing sort of machine learning and related technologies for some time now, but I think it was the first time that really sort of hit the mainstream. Yeah, this is a personal viewpoint. So again, IBM would probably shoot me for saying this, but I'm still thinking that we're missing a killer app for enterprise Gen AI. That is something really I think we're still struggling to hit. Yeah. So we, internally at IBM, we've got IBM Consultant Assistant, which you can go and search online, and you can get reams of information about that. Microsoft has started doing the agentic piece, which is very similar to what we're trying to do. Well, I think with sort of the Consulting Assistant. But if you look at where the first co-pilots were, where OpenAI is, it's great for sort of general stuff, assuming it isn't hallucinating and making stuff up as you in the response. But from an enterprise, I'm still not quite convinced that we've got that real sort of killer application that's going to go, right, this is where it really, 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 really makes sense. And we're able to do this and build on it from there. Go on, Dave, do you want to say something?
Yeah, and there was a very recent, I'm not sure this counts as last year, I can't remember when he did it, whether it might have been tail end of last year, but Satya did a interview with some chaps, and basically I think what he's saying, if I was to vastly summarize, is that SaaS applications, which are essentially CRUD, right? So create, read, update, delete, databases with business logic, will be replaced by Gen AI. Yeah. So if you think of all those SaaS platforms, so it's not necessarily about AI looking for the killer app, it's AI consuming all the existing SaaS apps and becoming the app. So it's quite a subtle nuance in what you were saying. And everyone's been like, oh no, can't possibly happen, can't possibly, But I think the fact that he's thinking about it now, I think is something that's worth keeping an eye on for sure, because if that's going to be the direction of travel, then as Copilot today is the UI for AI, then in the future, whatever interface becomes your business app interface, right? And all you do is, chat with this thing to get your work done in whatever way, shape, or form that looks like. It's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think I'm hoping. I was going to say touch wood, but I don't actually have any wood here. Imitation wood. That we'll start to see something along those lines, and purely from a sort of a more flippant perspective, in a Copilot sort of world, is I'm looking forward to the MSSP version of Security Copilot to be released, and because that is a pain for people that are doing sort of service lighthouse based, managed service providers, because it's all client side and you need something on your side of the fence as well to really make use of that. So hopefully that will be announced, I think, in this half from Microsoft. And I'd really, really love it if they actually unified the licensing models, because again, Security Copilot, to my best of my knowledge, is the only one that is sort of consumption based. Every one of the other Copilots is pretty much license based. Obviously, if you're calling out to other things, you might be getting storage costs or web app costs or whatever it might well be. But the actual component is, in theory, I think, license based. So that would be something that I would like to see on the Gen AI. I see. I had to really focus on saying that correctly.
Just go for generative.
Well, I found myself actually having to say generative. Because otherwise it just comes out as blah, blah.
It's the proper word. You're allowed to use it, Richard. It's okay.
But then there is a sort of flip side to that. As more organizations start to use generative AI, are we going to see, like I was going to say like the CrowdStrike, but that's probably an unfair comparison. But some sort of either big leak or some sort of serious hallucination that is actually going to cause issues. So I know the BBC are complaining at the moment to Apple about the AI summaries, because there's been two misleading headlines. One was around the murder of the health exec in the US, where I'll link the article, but if my memory is correct, it basically said that the guy had been shot, the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator had been shot, which is obviously incorrect. And then the more recent one is a very UK-focused one. So anybody who's listening out of this side of the UK will probably go, what the hell are you talking about? But there's a chap called Luke Littler who won one of the darts championships last week. And again, apparently on the AI summaries, it came out that he'd won before he actually had one.
Oh, hilarious.
Yeah, so there's been two issues with sort of BBC sort of headlines where that sort of caused some consternation. And, we can sit here and not necessarily laugh about it, but go, okay, yeah, that's not that serious. But as soon as something happens that people then start to take action on, that could become problematic. And I do worry that we're going to have at least one of those incidents next year. So either as some sort of weird breach happens, or some sort of hallucination is going to cause something negative to happen. But anyway, that's a downer. So I'm going to stop on that one and then say to either one of you two what you're thinking about. Can't be bringing things down. We should be light and happy,
Light and happy. I saw a really, let's keep the theme going. So I saw a really good use of generative AI. I use generative there. It was out in the US, and I'll share the link. I'll dig out the link. But there's an awful lot of consternation about, it's taking away work from creatives and this and that, all the bad stuff, right? And there was a teacher in the US who used it for, I guess, kindergartners, very, very young kids. And what she did was take a photo of each of the kids. She then, based on the time she spent with them in the class, obviously had an understanding of what she thought they were going to go forwards and do in the future. Mm-hmm. So she got the generative AI to create a picture of that person, of them as an older person in that role. So you had Johnny X being, a scientist, and, the little Missy being astronaut. But it looked like them in those roles, you know, a lawyer and this and that and the other. And the power of that visual cue, I think, is a really, really, really powerful thing for those kids, because they look at it and go, yeah, that could be me, actually. And then it sparks that whole journey off into whatever it might be. Now, it might come to nothing. But I think it was a lovely, lovely use of technology.
Yeah. Again, it's one of those things. I'm really sat on the sort of proverbial fence with generative AI, because I can see that there are a number of benefits. I mean, that's a really nice one that you just mentioned, because that's like affirmative, you know, building confidence up, giving people aspirations, et cetera, et cetera. And yet I look at the flip side of it, and I look at sort of like the deep fakes that basically using exactly the same type of technology. And again, there's been some negative news stories in the UK, and I'm sure there has been where else where, you know, celebrities have been sort of deep faked to convince people to invest in some crypto scam or some other weird and wonderful thing.
You see them all the time on Facebook, all the time. Yeah,
precisely. And it's just like, how do we sort of draw the line so we can use it for good? That's so corny, as opposed to the sort of malicious side of it. But yeah, it's the world that we live in at the moment, I'm afraid.
It's
again, I brought it down. We should be not thinking about that.
I'm most disappointed at you, Richard.
The only way to solve that, in my opinion, is just regulation and global international regulation. But until we have the same laws everywhere, it's kind of difficult. But
what was William Gibson's organisation? So again, my nerdy side is coming out. It's the Turing Police, if I remember correctly, from Neuromancer, which is basically an organisation that policed all the AIs that were around.
That could be it, but you can scale that to different things, like privacy. Do you need privacy for everyone? Because then you have everyone has a VPN, everyone can do things privately, Tor, these kind of things. So it's not just Gen AI; it's just like how you can police everyone. But will it be accepted today in the global population or not? So you can see resistance towards small change. So you can't. It's an interesting subject. I have one, and it's in a gray line. It's not negative. It's not positive. It's like the Schrödinger news. Okay, so you decide it can be good or bad. I'll share it quickly. It's have you heard about the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE? I don't know how to pronounce it, Dogi, but I think the pronunciation is bad. It's in the US, so it's a President-elect Trump, and saying that we will now do a saving for all the government IT spending of $2 trillion. So before even talking about 2 trillion for the audience, because for me it doesn't make sense. The number that is for me is too high. And I remember, and I had to write it down. I had 2 examples that helped me to understand what's a 2 trillion, 1 trillion. So an example, if you started counting one number per second without stopping to eat, sleep, breath, here's how long it will take. To count 1 million, 11.5 days, approximately. To count 1 billion, 30.7 years. To count 1 trillion, 30.7. No, sorry, it's in thousands. 31,000 years. So you add 1,000. Wow. It's just too much. And then you have an extra example for the money, for the earnings. You earn $1 per second. You have $1 million in 11.5 days. The other one is the same, 30 years and 31,000 years. So it's massive. And that news, why it was interesting, because they mentioned the word Elon Musk, etc. So I was like, if they reduce the spending, it can be excellent for IT companies, because you need to also think of AI. You know, AI will do more things efficiently, etc. But which AI? So that can be like either they do full with Musk, or they continue with the government-ready companies, which are Microsoft and IBM, the 2 main companies for government. So it's a news that will have an impact. And they didn't give any specific roadmap. They just give these big numbers. We're going to save 2 trillion. So they have also commitments, so they can't just cut. But it's something I want to keep under my radar and see whatever project we have. And because we know whatever impact the US will have impact the UK, Europe, and EMEA in general.
Hmm.
Sorry, I didn't want to be negative, but it can be good and bad. Huh? It's
No, leave the negativity to me. I'm becoming well known for it within audio, which is fine. I will bear that cross. Anyway, I am thinking that we are running a little bit over where we thought we were going to be.
Yeah.
So I think that just leaves us time to sort of have a quick sort of wrap up from our side. I think that we've got a lot to look forward to potentially this year from an IT perspective. And again, I think Gen AI is, and I managed to say it correctly this time, going to be very, very, very key to that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. And I think that perhaps we will take a few episodes, perhaps not next time, but a few hours to really sort of drill down what that actually means from a cloud perspective, and perhaps where that helps within the migrations or cybersecurity spaces. But if anybody is still watching or listening to this one, please put the like or subscribe notifications, click whatever thingy that you need to do. Leave a comment. If there's anything that you thought was missing from our sort of summaries, please put that in the comments, and we can look at that and build off of that. But for now, all it leaves me to say is, again, thank you for watching. Thank you for David and Cyrus for the insights and communication as always, and pass it across to you two.
Hopefully we're going to reach, as everyone was mentioning, AGI this year. I mean, a big word.
I saw something. I just said we need to wrap up, but I saw something on LinkedIn. Now, I haven't gone to the article yet, but apparently Sam says that AGI is here already. So I need to find that post and go and read his article.
It depends. Yeah, they kept the goalposts keep moving.
Yeah.
So this is the test.
The phrase was something like.
By the way, it has to. What's the current one? It has to earn £100 million before it's dollars, before it's classed as AGI. There's all sorts of different.
The quote was, and I'm going to have to go and find this, and then I'll link to it in the show notes just to make sure I was right. Was that AGI as it was defined, and I don't think that was defined bit, we have met or something along those lines. So again, the definition is the key component there. Anyway,
it's the rabbit hole we don't want to go down right now.
Precisely.
Sorry, let's wrap up.
For me, just thank you for listening to us in 2024. We're going to keep doing this in 2025, aren't we, Richard? So we intend to keep going and wish everyone a fabulous early start to 2025.
Excellent. Right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.